A warning label was bolted right to the machine. The words were clear. The danger was real. But someone decided it didn't apply to them that morning, and a man who had survived heartbreak, loss, and 4,000 miles of hard road paid for that decision with his life. If the sign was right there the whole time, why did Samuela Vakayawa still have to die? Samuela Kira Vakayawa had buried his father 6 months before he ever set foot in Australia. His marriage had fallen apart. He was 40 years old and starting over with nothing but determination and a plane ticket to Sydney. Within weeks, he was sending photos home. The Opera House, the Harbour Bridge, arms out, chin up, smiling like a man who had finally caught a break. His friends back in Fiji felt relief when they saw those photos. He was going to be okay. He had found work with A1 Arbor Tree Services, clearing trees across Sydney. He showed up early, worked hard, and made his co-workers laugh without even trying. On the morning of September 7th, 2019, he arrived at Clonmere Public School in Llandilo for what should have been a routine job. His task was simple: feed branches into the wood chipper, one by one. He had no idea the machine had already been flagged as faulty before that morning began. The warning label was right there on the body of the machine. Danger. Do not hand feed this machine. Severe injury or death can result. The design specifications were equally clear. A mechanical log loader was required. Without it, a person standing at the infeed hopper was too close to the internal disc drum spinning inside. A1 Arbor knew this. They had the documentation. And yet no loader was present, no risk assessment had been done, and the faulty machine was running anyway. At some point, his two co-workers stepped away to move a car. 30 seconds, maybe a minute. Samuela kept working because he had no reason to stop. When they came back, he was gone. There was blood on the machine and blood on the ground. The disc drum had done what it was built to do, and it had not stopped. Safe work. New South Wales investigated and found exactly what the label had already warned everyone about. The harm was foreseeable. The fix was simple. Neither had been acted on. The court fined A1 Arbor Tree Services $3 million. A guilty plea dropped it to $2.25 million. They saved $750,000 by saying sorry. Samuela's friends in Fiji got a phone call instead of another photo. He had crossed an ocean for a second chance. Someone could not be bothered to use the loader, and that was the end of him. Natalia Nemitz kissed her 10-year-old son, Ivan, goodbye on the morning of October 20th, 2017, and went to work at the Slaviana confectionery factory in Stary Oskol, Russia. She was 36 years old, and she worked long shifts in a building full of industrial mixers running at temperatures far beyond boiling because Ivan needed her to. That was the only reason. The factory produced sweets and confectionery, and at its center were massive open vats of molten caramel that shimmered with heat and never fully cooled. That morning, Natalia was assigned to clean one of the large caramel mixers. Routine work. She had done it before. She walked toward the machine without hesitation because there was no reason to hesitate. She did not know that 3 workers had already died inside that factory in the past 12 months. She did not know management had been aware each time. She did not know nothing had been fixed. There were no guardrails around the open vat, no lockout system to stop the machine from starting while someone worked beside it. No second worker assigned to watch. A guardrail costs almost nothing. A lockout procedure is a switch and a checklist. The factory had chosen not to install either. At some point while she was cleaning, something went wrong. The floor was slick. The heat was suffocating. Maybe she lost her balance for just a second. No one saw it happen. Her co-workers noticed she was missing and moved through the factory calling her name. Then one of them walked back toward the mixer. The machine was running. The caramel was turning slowly the way it always did. And above the surface were Natalia's legs. The rest of her was already gone. Management's response was to gather the workers and tell them to stay silent. Anyone who talked would be fired. No official report was filed. A local newspaper called Komsomolskaya Pravda forced the truth out anyway. Investigators arrived and confirmed what the workers already knew. No guardrails, no lockout, inadequate training, 3rd death in 1 year at the same facility. Ivan grew up without his mother because a factory decided a guardrail was not worth the expense. She had spent years showing up to a dangerous place so he could have a stable life. They took that from both of them. Stephen Dirk started his 9th day at the Caterpillar Foundry in Mapleton, Illinois on June 2nd, 2022, the way any new employee does, carefully. He was 39 years old with 3 daughters at home, age 4, 5, and 12. His partner Jessica was waiting for him. This job was supposed to be the thing that made the next chapter easier. Better pay, more stability, a real future for his girls. The foundry melted up to 1,000 tons of iron every single day. The crucibles on the floor ran at 2,600 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to reduce a human body to ash in seconds. What Stephen needed, and what he deserved, was a floor designed to make sure a mistake near one of those vats could not happen. 6 months before Stephen arrived, a worker named Scott Adams had died at the same facility. Workers had been filing safety reports for months before that. The crucibles had no guardrails, no harnesses were provided, no buddy system was required for workers operating near open vats of liquid metal. Caterpillar had looked at the death of Scott Adams and the stack of safety complaints and had changed nothing. That morning, Stephen was assigned to collect a sample of molten iron from one of the crucibles. 9 days on the job. He walked toward the vat the way he had been directed. No guardrail, no harness, no second worker, just Stephen and 2,600 degrees of liquid metal with nothing between them. He slipped. His lower body entered the crucible. The temperature did its work in an instant. By 10:20 in the morning, the foundry was evacuated. When investigators returned hours later, they found small fragments of bone. OSHA concluded the death was entirely preventable. Caterpillar, a company that generated $59 billion in revenue that year, was fined $145,000. No criminal charges were filed. Jessica received no support and no accountability from the company that had employed her partner. Stephen's youngest daughter was 4 years old. She will grow up with no memory of him that was not built from photographs. He went to work on day 9, trying to build something better for his family. Caterpillar had already been told what needed to change. They decided it was not urgent. That decision cost Stephen everything and cost them a fine they cleared before the month was over. 3 factories. 3 sets of warnings that sat on paper while people went to work and never came home. Samuela had a label bolted to his machine that said severe injury or death can result. The company knew the machine was faulty before he ever touched it. They sent him to work beside it anyway. Natalya had spent years showing up to a building full of open vats of molten caramel so her son could eat and go to school and have a life worth living. The guardrail that could have saved her would have cost less than an hour of production. Management looked at that number and decided it was not worth it. Stephen was 9 days into a job he had taken for his daughters. The man who died 6 months before him at the same facility had already made the argument that something needed to change. Caterpillar heard that argument and did nothing, and so Stephen walked toward an open crucible running at 2,600 degrees with no guardrail, no harness, and no one positioned to stop what happened next. These were not freak accidents. A freak accident is something nobody could have seen coming. Nobody could have predicted. These were the opposite of that. Every single one of these deaths was predicted in writing by the workers who were afraid and the inspectors who filed reports, and the safety labels printed directly onto the machines themselves. The predictions were ignored because ignoring them was cheaper than acting on them. That is the part that does not go away when you sit with these stories long enough. It was not incompetence. It was not oversight. It was a calculation. A1 Arbor Tree Services calculated that a mechanical loader was an unnecessary expense. The Slaviana factory calculated that guardrails and lockout procedures would slow down production. Caterpillar calculated that the fixes flagged after Scott Adams died were not urgent enough to prioritize, and in each case, the calculation was correct, right up until the moment it wasn't. Right up until the moment a real person paid the price that the company had decided it was not willing to pay itself. Samuela's fine came out to $2.25 million after the guilty plea. That sounds significant until you understand that A1 Arbor Tree Services saved $750,000 simply by saying sorry in a courtroom. Natalia's factory had already absorbed 2 other worker deaths that year and kept running. Stephen's death cost Caterpillar $145,000 against $59 billion in annual revenue. These are not punishments. They are the cost of doing business. They are a line in a spreadsheet that gets absorbed and forgotten, while 3 families try to figure out how to keep going without the person they lost. Ivan does not have his mother. Samuela's friends in Fiji stopped getting photos. Stephen's youngest daughter is growing up building a picture of her father from stories other people tell her. That is what the calculation actually cost. Not the fine, not the headline, not the OSHA report. It cost a 10-year-old boy his mother. It cost 3 little girls their father. It cost a man who had survived everything life had thrown at him, the second chance he had flown 4,000 miles to find. The warnings were there. They were always there. And somewhere in each of these factories, someone looked at those warnings and decided that today was not the day to take them seriously. For Samuela, for Natalia, and for Stephen, today was the only day that mattered.